Wayland absolutely never ceases to amaze me. Finally, after so long, the XDG Session Management Protocol has finally been merged into Wayland. This was opened by Jonas Adal and Mike Blumenkrantz back in 2020, and then finally merged by Vlad Zahorodny about a week ago. It has taken a while to get here, but unlike some of the protocols I've talked about, not for the reasons you might think. Firstly though, what is the protocol? Why did anybody care? For a variety of cases, it's desirable to have a method for negotiating the restoration of previously used states for a client's Windows. This helps for e.g. a compositor/client crashing, definitely not due to bugs, or a background client deciding to temporarily destroy its surfaces in order to conserve resources. This protocol adds a method for managing such negotiations and is loosely based on the Enlightenment Session Recovery Protocol, which has been implemented and functional for roughly 2 years. So roughly 2 years as of 2020. Albeit confusingly named, what does session management mean? This is the Session Restoration Protocol. So if your compositor crashes, you can then reopen the compositor and the applications are back like they were. Now, in some contexts, this is a little bit more complicated than just bring the window back. They also have window state. That does require functionality on the side of the applications, and as we'll see, there is a major application involved in supporting this. Whilst this is exciting and whilst this is cool, it may not be as exciting to see the merger as you might think, because this has been around for a while, and this has been supported for a while, so you've actually seen merger of this support into mainline desktops, and it's entirely possible you were already using this and didn't even realize. One thing I want to say is it's technically a lie to say this was opened in 2020. Technically, it was actually opened back in 2018, again by the same people, Jonas Adal and Mike Blumenkrantz, but this was over on the mailing list, and the mailing list isn't really used at this point, and the GitLab is the main place to do things. One thing I want to say is it's technically a lie to say this was opened in 2020. Technically, it was actually opened back in 2018, again by the same people, Jonas Adal and Mike Blumenkrantz, but this was over on the mailing list, and the mailing list isn't really used at this point, and the GitLab is the main place to do things. So this is really a continuation of that older work. This means we're about 8 years of discussion into this protocol, but not 8 years of really, really intensive discussion. And here we get into why it's kind of taken 8 years to get here. Most protocols I talk about that I think are really interesting have some level of major infighting, some big arguments happening, some big blockers that come up that say, hey, I don't want to support this. Hey, we shouldn't have this in Wayland. That's not what happened here. In fact, it's actually the complete opposite. For the first year on the GitLab, there were some threads opened up regarding like spelling mistakes and some minor implementation details like, hey, how should we phrase this thing? How should we phrase that thing? But for the most part, it's all pretty basic stuff where nobody had like a major disagreement. Frankly, not many people were even involved in working on the project at that point. It was pretty much just the two of them. For the most part, and I know this is rare in Wayland, basically smooth sailing. Like, no blockers, not really much work from people outside of the two of them, but nothing crazy going on, which for Wayland, especially at this time, that's weird. Probably because people were distracted with other projects and other protocols that were a lot more mentally intensive, we'll say. As of September 2021, someone posted a ping. There was a minor question which wasn't really relevant to the protocol. Then we have Zava from the KDE project, who actually had some maybe not questions, but some clarifications about the protocol. I think this protocol could use a restoration reason flag. There are multiple situations in which it makes sense to restore some specific properties, but not all of them. Examples would be application was started normally, size the window, keep above state, optionally position on the screen. Actual session restoration and compositor crashes, position, size, keep above, virtual desktop, position in the stacking order, and system tray activation, position, size, keep above, but not VD or position in the stacking order. And the consensus here is pretty much that this is implementation details, this is something that is relevant on KDE, but doesn't necessarily need to be defined within the protocol itself. Granted, there was some interest in maybe going down that route and exploring that idea, and that's sort of the point of these early protocol discussions. You have the core idea of what you want to do, and then you flesh things out. Maybe there's cases you missed, maybe there's additional functionality you want. You have to decide what is the scope of the protocol, what makes sense to be in the protocol, and then in the desktops implementing the protocol. This happened in October of 2021, and then, well, nothing happened for another 2 months. From Simon Sir of the WL Roots project, any chance this MR can be revived? From Jonas, I'll try to allocate some time, again, an entire month later, to address the raised issues. Should be a bit more up to date now, but needs more work, I think. August of 2022. So, there's like a 7-8 month gap between, hey, you know, what's going on here? And then something actually happening. And from then on, we finally start to see some sort of interest in working on the project. We have David Edmondson from KDE, we have Sebastian Wick from GNOME, and in the replies here, you're also going to see a bunch of other people from various other projects as well. Finally, it seems like people actually realized that this protocol exists, or if not the protocol exists, that maybe they just weren't fully busy with the other things they were working on. So about 2.5 years into the protocol existing in the repo, open, being kinda discussed, then people finally jump in. Truly, Wayland broken down to its absolute core. But again, still no major disagreements on the protocol, more like just general concerns and technical implementation details. How should things be done? Should it be this way? Should it be that way? We need to iron these things out so everybody has an implementation that actually makes sense and fits what everybody is trying to do. But nobody here is saying, I don't like the existence of this protocol. I think all of this is bad. All of this is dumb and this shouldn't be done. It's pretty much just, how do we do this right? And around that time, David Edmondson of KDE went and made a tracking issue for things that need to be worked on. I don't know why their GitLab is loading so slowly recently. I assume they have some infrastructure issues, or somebody is DDoSing KDE once again. When we're talking about a desktop like KDE Plasma, this isn't just about making changes in the desktop itself. The same is going to apply to GNOME as well. If you want to support this protocol, changes also need to be made in the toolkit. In KDE's case, that is Qt. In GNOME's case, that is GTK. In Cosmic's case, that would be iced. Now, within KDE, there was a lot of interest in trying to make this protocol happen, because this is one of the major blockers they had for going Wayland only. They want to make it so that if it crashes, they don't want it to crash, but if it crashes, things can come back. This, I don't know if they agree, but I assume they would agree here. This feels like one of those major oversights with Wayland that should have been there from the very start. How this wasn't part of the basic Wayland protocol set is absolutely beyond me. Whilst the main thread itself was kinda quiet, there was work happening in KDE's thread, in GNOME's thread, and it's just that people kind of off doing their own thing. So it looks like kind of nothing was done here pretty much for another year until we have Matthias Klump. Hi, I've read through the proposed protocol, but only skimmed through the discussions. It's quite extensive. So It's quite extensive. This is one of the shorter protocols, to be completely honest, so I hope my questions here haven't been addressed before. I am coming specifically from the use case of an application remembering multiple profiles for its windows and allowing users to select them via e.g. a drop-down menu. Many scientific applications use this paradigm, outlined in, again, if you don't remember who Matthias Klump is, he is the one who had the idea of the window placement protocol, the window positioning protocol that caused a giant uproar. At this time, he was still relatively new to being involved in Wayland and didn't know what he was getting himself involved into yet. And again, here we just have some technical questions about what the protocol should be aiming to do, but again, no major crazy disagreements, so things pretty much progressed from there. And whilst not much was going on in the thread, you did see progress in other places. So at the time, there was a Western implementation and also one in Kwin. But even with that being the case, no one had acked the protocol yet. An ack is an acknowledgement, basically saying, hey, we think the protocol is a good idea, it should be eventually merged. Following that were a couple of threads opened up by GNOME people, and then very shortly after, on June 19th, 2024, we now had GNOME and GTK implementations. And then, very shortly after that, we had another really big project get involved, or at least interest in getting involved, Chromium. We are very much looking forward to this for implementing workspace restoration in Chromium Wayland. Is there an estimated timeline for when this could be merged? This was on August 15th, 2024. Given there's been some consensus on this protocol thus far, even though there are open discussions, could there still be major deviations from the current version when it gets merged? Now, I've mentioned some implementations, and when you want to have a protocol merged, I believe you need 3 of them? I want to say 3. Well, we had well more than 3. We had well more than you would ever actually need to have a protocol merge. Now, the Western one, that wasn't included because that was actually a testing case rather than a real merger. But we have Kwin, Mutter, GTK, Qt, Chromium, SDL, and Rust W and Knit, which is like a Rust windowing thing. But again, even with all of these implementations, you have an implementation from Kwin and Qt, Mutter and GTK. Nobody had acked the protocol. This was in August of 2024. Clearly, everybody was on board with the protocol. Everybody was working towards the protocol being merged, but nobody had acked the stupid protocol yet. And you want to know what makes that extra funny? GNOME was shipping an experimental draft version of the protocol in GNOME 47. I believe it was even being shipped in KDE as well. So, like, people were testing out the protocol in production. People were using the protocol. There were users who had access to the protocol. And nobody was like, hey guys, I think the protocol's a good idea. How does this happen? Like, I've talked about so many cases of people hating a protocol, it being a nightmare to get it merged. But when there's no disagreement, still, this protocol should have been merged 2 years ago. Following that, there were some other questions being asked, things like that. And then finally, the needs implementations was dropped in October of 2024. However, protocol details were still being ironed out. Some minor issues, little things here and there, nothing major, but things just kept progressing along the way. We saw a proper Chromium implementation in February of 2025. There was also still the experimental support in GNOME, now on GNOME 48, with no major issues for any of this. It seemed like it was working totally fine. adding some new feedback found while finishing experimental support for this protocol in Chromium, and things just kind of kept going on from there. Some minor clarifications, some minor cleanups, pretty much just everybody agrees with the protocol, and things are slowly being ironed out even further. And it just keeps going like this for quite a while. One such case of clarification is it's unclear how a client would know if it was terminated due to resource constraint, e.g. the killed it, so the out of memory killed it, the thing that makes sure your system is actually still usable when you are using too much memory. Do we expect any difference in behavior between these two? Can they not be merged into a single entry? It might be possible that some environments want to strategically terminate applications in the background and restart them once they become focused in the foreground again. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but I guess theoretically, that could be a case you would want. Applications should definitely be notified about it and would likely want to behave differently, e.g. avoiding application left unexpectedly dialogues, even if, as far as I know, this is not used nowadays anywhere in the Linux desktop. There are certainly possibilities. I don't think this is used really anywhere, like, anywhere at all? Like, but I guess, sure, if we want to make some, like, weird use case possible that no one has ever done before, I guess, sure, why not? Let's talk about that. Nor Linux nor BSD have any mechanism to notify applications you're going to be oomed. And typical applications would have no way of reacting to such a theoretical signal without allocating the killer delivers sig kill. I love the naming of things on Linux, by the way. Now, that's actually not true, because if you have a user space manager like systemd, early KDE and GNOME, as an example, ship the required integrations for systemd to be aware and handle signal terminations. I just enjoy saying And then, finally, 2 weeks ago, it happened. ACK from KDE. The current protocol proposal looks very reasonable, and it helps to bring the Wayland session closer to feature parity with X11. Finally, this happened. Shortly after that, then there was an ACK from GNOME as well. Finally, after 2 years of it being shipped in the desktops, of everybody agreeing the protocol was a good idea, finally, it actually got ACKed. There was no reason it couldn't have been ACKed before, right? When something is ACKed, it doesn't mean it has to be merged straight away. There can be a delay from that. They can wait on the review period. They can do all this stuff. They can go, okay, we ACK it, but hey, maybe there's some additional changes we want to make. There is no reason it should have taken 2 more years to ACK it. Then shortly after that was a review from Vlad Zahorodny. Everything looks good to me. Everything's good to go. And then the merge request was approved. However, they didn't actually have the third ACK yet, because Chromium didn't ACK it until a few days later. So they were willing to jump the gun because everybody agreed with merging the protocol anyway. It's just, it was not officially ACKed. Finally, it got merged. This protocol was a mess in a whole different way from some of the negative protocols. It was a mess because everybody agreed to merge the protocol. Everybody agreed the protocol was a good thing. Everybody had an implementation of the protocol. Nobody wanted to go and say, hey, let's go and merge the protocol. And there was no argument. There was no, like, crazy debate. It's just, it kept getting pushed further and further down the list. So it just took way longer than it ever should to get to this point when nobody disagreed with merging the protocol. But Wayland will be Wayland, and it'll continue doing this over and over again. You know what? This is probably a better state than everybody arguing about whether or not the protocol is a good idea, because eventually, at least it's gonna get merged and gonna get implemented. So, things might get delayed, but something can still happen. Anyway, if you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe, go like the video as well. I said like the video, subscribe again, click the subscribe button 3 times. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna go. If you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, Library Pay, linked in the description down below. that's going to be it for me, and tell me your favorite protocol.